Update. Am I the a-hole for ignoring my husband and visiting my son on the 4th of July? Original post. I, 40 female, have been married to my now husband Joe for 15 years. I have a son, Matt, 22, from my previous relationship with Jake. Right after I graduated high school, I moved into Jake's house. He passed away 3 years later from cancer. 2 years after that, I met Joe, and we got married a year later. Joe moved into my house, which was owned by my deceased husband. When my son turned 18, Joe apparently told Matt that he had to pay $500 a month for rent and utilities. Matt told him that he actually owned the house we live in, and because he wanted to be vindictive, said Joe could pay $1,000 a month to him or get out. My husband didn't believe him, but I confirmed that this was Matt's house, and we couldn't force him to do anything. Rent didn't matter to Matt because his dad left him a fortune to cover expenses for the rest of his life. I really wish Joe had talked to me about this before saying anything, because we have 3 sons. I'm a middle school teacher and my husband works in a factory, so our combined income is only $75,000. Here, everyone has their own room, with a huge backyard and pool. We could never afford to own or rent a place like this otherwise. My husband was shocked and tried to apologize, but my son didn't accept it and insisted he had to pay or leave. The most we could afford was a 2-bedroom apartment in a bad neighborhood. I told Joe that uprooting our kids from a good school district and their friends because of his mistake wasn't an option. A month passed, and my husband hasn't paid his rent. When my son asked for it, my husband just laughed and said he wasn't paying. My son gave him an eviction notice. My husband suggested we go to his parents' house, but I refused and said either he pays or he goes by himself. He paid and has continued to pay since then. However, my husband refuses to talk to Matt. Other than that, everything in the house is perfect. My ex also left my son a lake house in Florida. My son graduated college and wanted to take all of us on vacation to celebrate before he starts law school. My husband was excited, but my son quoted him $800. He explained that a grown man shouldn't be taking a handout. Joe stormed off. This morning, the 5 of us plus Matt's girlfriend were headed out the door. Joe yelled at me and couldn't believe I was going. I told him I'm not going to let me and the kids suffer for a mistake he made trying to be a macho. I left, and my husband sent me a text message saying he was disappointed in me for siding with my son instead of him and for turning the kids against him. Am I the a-hole? Now for the top comments before reading the updates. Wow, your now husband told his stepson to pay rent for a house he doesn't own without consulting you first? I'll be honest and say your husband sounds like a douchebag a-hole. He should have immediately apologized. Talk to your son. Ask whether you can stay there if you divorce him. Jesus Christ. Not a-hole. Yeah, I have a feeling that Joe was trying to basically steal $500 a month in fun money for himself. What a greedy, stupid freaking idiot. You can do better than this loser. The fact he didn't tell her means there was no way he'll be using that for bills or anything. He would probably be counting on his stepson knowing this was a man thing and not saying anything to his mom. Everyone sucks here, except the son and younger kids. I really have to wonder what your eldest son had to put up with while he was growing up. Your husband knew it wasn't his house, knew he wasn't paying rent, and knew he was not your son's father. I'm kind of at a loss as to why he thought it was okay to make that kind of demand without talking to his stepson's parent. My guess is he saw a way to make $500 extra and was counting on you not finding out and or just bullying you into accepting it. Super icky. Edit? I did leave a few things out. After reading the replies, I thought to add some things. I technically never married my son's father. He was 50 when we had our son, so he had a really good job and a few properties. I never told Joe that I didn't own the house because he would have never agreed to staying in the house that my ex owned. So I handled all finances. Joe would just pay me his portion of utilities and bills. A lot of you guys are saying that I didn't handle the situation, but I believe I handled it to the best of my ability. When the situation first happened, I told Joe I really love him and would love to remain a family with a decent quality of life. But if he couldn't remain in this household, I would agree to divorce him. He begged me to not divorce and said that he'll just pay my son the money. I thought that was the best way to handle the situation. Also, our finances are separate, so it's not taking away from me or the kids. But Joe doesn't really have money for his hobbies and interests. which was a problem for a while until he learned to just get over it. Now for the first update. So I took your advice to try to solve this situation. I asked Matt why Joe paying rent is necessary. Matt told me it isn't, and that he hasn't touched the money Joe gave him. It's in a bank account. I asked him why he is doing this then. Matt told me Joe has never apologized for demanding rent money to begin with. I was confused and said Joe told me he apologized. Matt explained he never got an apology, and when he does, Joe can stop paying rent and get the money back. I called Joe and asked why he's never apologized to Matt. And he was honest with his answer and said because Matt disrespected him in his house, and he should be the man of the house and have authority. But was embarrassed when he found out about the house because he realized that Matt was actually in control of him. I asked what was his full intentions when he asked Matt to pay rent. Joe said it was to help lessen the bills. Joe only makes $2,500 a month, and $500 went to bills, another $500 went to the kids, and another $250 on groceries. He also helps his parents out. He had nothing at the end of the month for his personal expenses, and this $1,000 a month definitely did not help. He thought about apologizing, but he said his ego wouldn't let him. Joe said he loves Matt, but doesn't think he could ever forgive him. I told him he started this mess, and honestly, if he thought I owned a house, it wasn't his place to charge my son rent. He just hung up the phone. So that's where we stand. I don't know what to do. Second update. When we got home, Joe's parents were there. Me, Matt, Joe, and his parents had a talk. They asked me how can I let Matt treat him this way, and that a wife should back her husband up. Before I could talk, Matt said a man who marries a mother should treat her kids like his own, but he hasn't been doing that for the past 15 years. I asked what Matt is talking about. He said every time I went on one of my teacher conferences or went on vacation, Joe would leave him at home by himself and take the other boys out to do something fun. He always disguised it as it was kid stuff and I wouldn't like it, but tell you I didn't want to go. At 18, he actually planned on moving out, but COVID happened, so he just decided to stay. I asked Joe if it was true, and he looked at me and said yeah, he shouldn't have to take care of someone else's kid. His parents looked disgusted, and his dad just went off on him and said he didn't raise him like this. I yelled at him and told him to get the heck out. He pleaded that he was sorry and that he realized that he was wrong with how he felt. His dad told him to leave, and when my husband tried to get in their car to go home with them, they said absolutely not, and that he was on his own. He tried going to his brother's house, but when he heard a full story, he said no, because he has kids and would be upset if their stepmom treated them horribly. From what I heard, he's staying with a friend. I had divorce papers given to him at his job. He texted me and asked if we can meet. We met at a cafe and he said he was really sorry and has been for a long time, and that he never meant to hurt me or Matt, but that he said it was hard to love another man's child. I just left. He's filed the papers, so I guess our divorce is about to start. I apologized to Matt for being a bad mom. He's fine, and our oldest son heard the conversation and doesn't want anything to do with his dad. The youngest, too, still spends time with him. Imagine alpha mailing yourself right out of a home and a marriage. What a stupid person. What kind of mom finds out her husband demanded her son pay rent or get out and doesn't throw him to the curb? Or at least ask the son if things were okay before the rental demand. She totally missed her son being treated less than for 15 years? Yeah, 110%. Surprised Matt doesn't kick both Joe and Mommy out after the nonsense they have both pulled, and the fact they're both mooching off of him. Big ick. Not a-hole. Your husband is a major a-hole. He can't love another man's child or treat that child decently. Although he has no problem being financially supported by another man's child, he is a complete and total loser. I hope Matt keeps the money. I find it hard to believe that you had no idea about how he truly felt about your son. How did you not know he didn't include your son when you were away? As a mother myself, I could never believe that you didn't suspect anything. Yeah, it feels like there was some willful ignorance happening on her part. My stepdad was more like a roommate. We had no issues with him, but he would have never felt comfortable demanding we pay rent and expect my mother would deal with it. The previous post, it felt like if it was her house and not her son's, her son would have ended up paying rent and she would have let it happen. Glad she filed for divorce, but it has been going on for how long and she never clocked there was an issue? Her son never said anything to her or behaved in a way that showed her relationship wasn't there? It doesn't make sense. Next story. Am I the a-hole for telling my husband he shouldn't be upset when my daughter said that her uncle would be the one to walk her down the aisle on her wedding day? Fake names and please do be kind. I, 46 female, got pregnant with my daughter Sarah, female 26, when I was in college. My parents and my then boyfriend's parents pushed us to marry, which we did. My late husband, unfortunately, passed away a week after our daughter's second birthday because of a heart complication that we did not even know he had. It was a very hard time for me, and I went through a very bad depression. 4 years later, I met my now husband Robert, male 46, on a blind date set up by a friend. He was one of my best friend's cousin. We hit it off and got married a year later. Even when we were dating, he was very hands-on with my daughter, and it did not take too long for my daughter to call him Papa. Even until we got married, and when I got pregnant 2 years into the marriage and gave birth to twins, male 17 and female 17, he still acted like a father to Sarah. She was even included in my husband's family reunions and a cousin group photo shoot that my in-laws organized every Christmas. Things took a bit of a turn when Sarah turned 18. She started calling him by his first name, and both Robert and I were taken aback with the change of attitude she was displaying. I asked Robert what was that about, but he only shrugged, not knowing the reason too. I thought things would go back to normal, but she has been consistent in calling him by his first name, so I asked her if we could talk. Robert asked if he could join, which Sarah agreed. To make it short, my daughter overheard my husband talking about a Father's Day trip to his friend who owns a hostel. His friend asked him if he forgot to include Sarah since my husband only asked him to prepare 3 bedrooms. My husband replied that he planned this trip for his real children only. It wouldn't make sense if Sarah was in the trip since he wasn't her real father. This made Sarah feel betrayed and hurt because she saw him as her real dad, even if she knew he was her stepdad. My husband tried to explain to her that though he loves her as a father, his love for the twins were different since they were his real children. I wanted to just shut him up because he was overusing the word real, but Sarah told us to leave her room. What made that day even more depressing was that this day was her last week with us before she leaves the country for college. Since then, every time she comes home, Sarah acts like nothing happened but continues to call Robert by his first name. Robert didn't want to add fuel to the fire and just tolerated it. And now, a few years since then, my daughter announced her engagement to her longtime boyfriend. We were very happy for her as they have been dating since they were still college freshmen. 2 weeks before their wedding, we were wondering who would be walking Sarah down the aisle. I assumed it would be Robert since I thought we have moved past that incident. But no. My daughter scoffed at me when I told her about Robert walking her down the aisle. She said, "I thought it was obvious that Uncle Greg, my late husband's brother, would be the one to do that. Besides, I'm not his real daughter. It wouldn't make sense if he walked me down the aisle." I did not talk back. Instead, apologized for my ignorance and told her that I'll speak with Robert about it, since he also assumed he'd be the one to walk her down the aisle. When I told him what Sarah said, he was mad. But I politely reminded him of the incident years ago, which made him even more upset. He said that it was a long time ago, and that Sarah should move on. I, who was offended for my daughter, told him that he shouldn't be upset, since he doesn't see her as his real child anyway. He then got teary-eyed and told me to not speak to him. He still attended Sarah's wedding but looked visibly down. We still aren't on good terms and we have been pretending in front of relatives. My daughter does not know about this and I want to keep it that way. But nevertheless, it's been a week since my daughter's wedding and Robert is still upset. He only talks to me about the twins and household stuff, but beyond that, he keeps everything to himself. I feel really bad and think he is acting this way because of me. So with that being said, am I the a-hole? Not a-hole. She saw him as her real father, but he didn't see her as his real daughter. He can't pick and choose when she's his daughter and when she isn't. He wants her to treat him as her real father while he doesn't have to treat her as his real daughter. This, and a part where he said he thought she would have moved on. The fact that he thinks he could just crush someone like that and thinks she could just move on after learning her papa doesn't love her like he loves his real kids. Honestly, I think Robert just liked to look like he's this great guy that raised the poor girl without a dad. He doesn't get what he did and is playing victim like he was wronged. Meanwhile, he's the one that caused this by being fake. She did move on, away from her fake father. He's darn lucky he was invited to the wedding. She didn't even move on away from him. He told her that they had a different relationship dynamic than what she thought. She took that to heart and altered her behavior to better suit the relationship dynamic he told her they had. He is being treated exactly how he treats her. She's not treating him poorly. She just doesn't treat him like her father because he told her he is not. Edit/mini update. I would like to thank everyone for your advice and comments. My daughter found and commented in my post, and we will be talking about this tomorrow. She just messaged me earlier. I was feeling tired today and could not sleep, so I was able to write this. I also want to thank the people for calling me out. I know I'm not the best mother, but I try. But yes, I am an a-hole for tolerating him. I don't know what will happen in our talk tomorrow, but I do want everyone to have closure. I also want to add that my daughter and I do not have a strained relationship. She did not want me to walk down the aisle because then Robert would be pushing her to let him walk her too, since he thought we're a package. I will try to update, but it would be difficult since I know it's going to be emotional. Last story. Am I the a-hole for refusing to babysit my sister's kids after she accused me of stealing? I, 25 female, need some advice because my family's in uproar over this. My sister, Emily, 32 female, has 3 kids, 7 male, 5 female, and 2 female. I adore my nieces and nephew, and I've always been the go-to babysitter whenever Emily needed help. I've taken them in overnight, watched them on weekends, and even took care of them for a week when Emily and her husband went on vacation. A few weeks ago, Emily called me in panic, saying she had lost her wedding ring. She asked if I had seen it, and I genuinely hadn't. I helped her search the entire house, but we couldn't find it. Emily was really upset, but we eventually gave up. A few days later, Emily called me again, this time in tears, accusing me of stealing her ring. She said she couldn't think of anyone else who would have taken it, since I'm the only person who's been in the house alone. I was shocked and hurt that she would accuse me of something like that. I tried to convince her that I would never do such a thing, but she wouldn't listen. She even threatened to call the police if I didn't return it. I couldn't believe my own sister would think so little of me. My parents got involved and took Emily's side, saying that it was suspicious that the ring disappeared right after I had been there. They pressured me to confess and return the ring, but I stood my ground because I was innocent. In the midst of this family drama, Emily asked me to babysit her kids for a few hours because she had an emergency at work. I refused, telling her that I couldn't help someone who thought I was a thief. She called me selfish and said I was punishing her kids for something they had nothing to do with. My parents are now furious with me, saying that family should stick together no matter what, and that I'm being petty and immature. They believe I should just let it go for the sake of the children. Emily has continued to insist that I took the ring, and my refusal to babysit has only made things worse. Emily, her husband, and my parents are calling me an a-hole for refusing to babysit and taking it out on kids who have nothing to do with this. Am I the a-hole for refusing to babysit my sister's kids after she accused me of stealing? Not the a-hole. Your sister's actions were completely out of line, and your family should be ashamed of themselves. Accusing someone of stealing is a huge deal, especially when it's a close family member. And to then turn around and expect you to babysit like nothing happened is beyond disrespectful. Stand your ground. They need to understand the gravity of what they did to you. An apology should be the bare minimum after accusing you of such a serious offense. Not the a-hole. And if you ever do give in or go back, the ring will magically reappear, and everyone will be told you returned it. The ring might have already appeared. Coincidence that sister suddenly had an emergency at work. Sister might be setting the stage for finding the ring. Another scenario is one of the kids was playing with it and lost it. Not the a-hole. This is absolutely infuriating. Your sister has the audacity to accuse you of theft and then expects you to just babysit her kids like nothing happened? Hell no. Your family's enabling this toxic behavior by siding with her without any proof. They're all treating you like a scapegoat, and it's disgusting. You don't owe any of them anything, especially babysitting. They owe you a massive apology, and you have every right to refuse to babysit until they do. This is beyond just a misunderstanding. It's a blatant attack on your character. Stand your ground and don't let them guilt trip you into backing down.